Deep inside Russia, a fireball erupts as a Tu-22M3 bomber hits the ground, taken out by a Ukrainian missile. A Russian A-50 mainstay early warning aircraft suffers the same fate, turned to bits of scrap metal by a long-range Ukrainian missile strike. An industrial facility in the Bryansk region becomes debris as another Ukrainian missile strikes. You're probably thinking it was advanced Western HIMARS, Storm Shadow, Scalp, or ATACMS missiles responsible for these blows, but it wasn't. The ingenious Ukrainians have resurrected an ancient Soviet system, the S-200, and are using it to attack Russian aircraft and facilities deep inside Russia. Here's how Ukraine is using these Soviet antiques to attack Russia. Back in the 1960s and 1970s, the S-200, also known by its NATO designation, the SA-5 Gammon, was one of the Soviet Union's most powerful long-range air defense systems. This surface-to-air missile system was originally designed to protect large areas and key installations against the threat of US long-range high-altitude bombers, particularly the B-52 Stratofortress. The first S-200 operational regiments were deployed in 1966, with 18 sites and 342 launchers in service by the end of the year. By 1968, there were 40 sites, and by the end of the following year, there were 60. The numbers gradually increased to 1,100 launchers by the end of the 1970s and early 80s, reaching a peak of 130 sites and 2,030 launchers by 1990. As one of the Soviet Socialist republics making up the USSR, at least 13 of those systems were stationed in Ukraine, and when Ukraine gained independence in 1991, the new nation retained them. The original version, the S-200A Angara, with the V-860 5V21 or V-860P 5V21A missile, introduced in 1967, had a range of 99 miles and a ceiling of 12.5 miles. The upgraded S-200V Vega with the V-860PV, 5V21P or 5V28V missiles, introduced 3 years later, increased the range to 160 miles and the ceiling to 18.1 miles. However, equipped with the V-870 missile, the range increased to 170 miles and ceiling to 25. In 1973, the Soviets introduced an export version, the S-200VE Vega E, with the V-880E 5V28E high-explosive warhead missile, with a range of 149 to 158 miles and a ceiling of 25.4 miles. Later, between 1999 and 2002, Poland refitted the S-200VE into the S-200C. Russia has subsequently introduced the S-300 and S-400 missile defense systems, and is in the process of releasing the supposedly cutting-edge S-500. But with the exception of just a few of the dozens of variants of the S-300 and S-400, the range of the S-200 is significantly greater than either. Most variants have an effective range of only 40 to 100 miles. The extended range of up to 160 miles or beyond, as we shall soon see, is one of 5 factors that make the S-200 so useful for Ukraine. The second is the size of the payload. The S-200s utilized by Ukraine are using the 5V28E missile, or an upgraded version of it. The Ukrainians are believed to have had hundreds of the original missiles stockpiled in February 2022 when Russia commenced its invasion. While no transfer was initially announced, it's since been confirmed that Poland supplied Ukraine with an S-200 Angara system and 20 missiles in 2023, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. Poland, which still operates legacy Soviet systems, had previously delivered upgraded SA-3 air defense missiles to Kyiv as well. The 5V28E is over 35 feet long, has a diameter of almost 30 inches, and weighs a whopping 8 tons. Its high-explosive fragmentation warhead weighs 478 pounds in total and contains 16,000 2-gram fragmentation pellets, 21,000 3.5-gram pellets, and 200 pounds of explosives. Triggered by a radar proximity fuse, the warhead was designed to destroy targets within a 120-degree cone at up to 660 feet. And judging by the evidence on and above the battlefield, it remains pretty effective at that. The missile is launched by 4 solid-fueled strap-on 5S-25 rocket boosters, which burn for between 3 and 5 seconds, generating a total of around 160 tons of force. After the boosters burn out, they are released from the missile in pairs and drop away. The missile's second stage is a liquid-fueled 5D-67 Sustainer rocket engine, fueled by a highly toxic propellant made up of 2 components. The first is TG02 salmon fuel, which is 50% xylidine and 50% trimethylamine. That's mixed with the oxidizing agent AK27P, which consists of at least 69.5% pure nitric acid and 24 to 28% dinitrogen tetroxide. The second stage burns for between 51 and 150 seconds. The third advantage that missile provides Ukraine is its operational altitude. With a minimum engagement range of 11 miles, the 5V28E variant can engage targets at altitudes of up to 133,900 feet. with a minimum altitude of 980 feet beyond 24 miles and above 3,300 feet at shorter ranges. That makes this missile ideal for targeting Russian high-altitude bombers and reconnaissance aircraft, especially when combined with the fourth advantage it provides Ukraine, its speed. Target speeds range between Mach 0.29 or 220 miles per hour and Mach 3.5 or 2,700 miles per hour, although the Ukrainians say that it can actually reach closer to Mach 4. That means the missile reaches its maximum effective range of 138 nautical miles after just 215 seconds. Even advanced Western systems like the US Patriot and German Iris-T struggle to track and take down missiles traveling at that speed, let alone Russia's inferior systems. So the 5V-28E may be old, but it's big, fast, and very destructive, and can engage air or ground-based targets at extended range and/or altitude. That means it functions like a long-range ballistic missile, the fifth advantage that the missile provides to Ukraine. Throughout the war, the lack of an arsenal of long-range ballistic missiles has been a notable and controversial chink in Ukraine's armor. The type of weapon greatly expands Ukraine's air defense capabilities, allowing it to target Russian aircraft well behind the front lines. That forces Russia to launch air attacks from further away and to use its more limited supply of expensive, longer-range missiles to attack targets closer to the front lines. Long-range ballistic missiles also allow Ukraine to strike targets like airfields and production facilities deeper inside Russia. It's well documented how Western providers of military aid to Ukraine were initially reluctant to provide long-range missiles, and particularly for strikes deep inside Russia. Their concerns were twofold. First, some nations worry about depleting their own limited supplies. These missiles are generally neither cheap nor quick to produce. Second, they were worried about Russian retaliation. Moscow had repeatedly made clear that the provision of long-range missiles to Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia was a serious red line. Crossing it, they said, would invite serious consequences, including the possibility of strikes against the providing nations or the use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Eventually, countries like the US, UK, and France relented and have provided Ukraine with the likes of HIMARS, Storm Shadow, and Scalp missiles and launcher systems, respectively. Ukraine is still hopeful that under new Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Germany will at some point greenlight the provision of its long-range Taurus missiles. Previous Chancellor Olaf Scholz's government had vacillated but ultimately refused for over 2 years. Ukraine has used the NATO missiles it's been provided to good effect, striking a growing number of targets ever deeper inside Russia. However, there simply aren't enough available to them to cause catastrophic, widespread damage. That's why the enterprising and industrious Ukrainians have been hard at work developing their own long-range ballistic missiles. And such has been their progress that in December 2024, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky set an ambitious goal of producing 3,000 domestically made missiles by the end of 2025. When Russia crossed the Ukrainian borders in February 2022, Ukraine's arsenal included only one domestically developed missile, and only a few hundred units of it at that. That's the Neptune anti-ship missile, with a range of up to 190 miles and a speed of up to 560 miles per hour. This is the missile that famously sank Russia's flagship Moskva cruiser, a $750 million asset, on April 14, 2022. Fast forward 3 years and Ukraine has unveiled at least 4 new systems that are either in development or already seeing combat use. The first is a long-range version of the Neptune, dubbed the Long Neptune, which is being upgraded with an emphasis on striking ground targets. The second, the Palyonitsia, is part rocket, part drone, with a rumored range of around 435 miles. Most other specifications are still classified, but it is known to have undergone 18 months of development, passed all tests, and is currently in mass production. Also highly classified, the Payload, which means hell in Ukrainian, was unveiled in December 2024. It's another cruise missile with a range of around 435 miles that is reportedly also currently in mass production. And the latest addition is the Ruta, named after the rue plant, a symbol deeply rooted in Ukrainian tradition. Very little is known about this missile except that it's in the final stages of testing. Analysts estimate it has a range of up to 186 miles, a top speed of just below 500 miles per hour, and a warhead weighing roughly 220 pounds. Assuming these missiles perform as expected, a year from now, Ukraine will have a steady flow of them with which to pummel the Russians. But until then, the antique S-200 and its 5V-28E missiles are the most effective and accessible ballistic missiles available to Ukraine. Forbes went so far as to call it Kyiv's most potent deep strike weapon. Before the current conflict, the S-200 was best known in Ukrainian service for an infamous incident in October 2001, when an errant missile from one of the batteries shot down a Russian airliner over the Black Sea during a live fire exercise. By this point, the system was already nearing or past its sell-by date, and by 2010, it was reported that Ukraine had only 4 S-200 batteries still active, with another 12 sites inactive. Eventually, the S-200 was removed from service entirely in Ukraine in 2013. But since the invasion began, clearly some, if not all of these units, have had the cobwebs dusted off and been returned to service, to increasingly devastating effect. However, as we shall soon see, they've almost certainly received upgrades to convert them into effective missiles for modern warfare. Where the missile sites are based is, as you would expect, top-secret information. The major downside of the S-200 system is its size, especially considering that it's not a mobile system, so it must be installed pretty much permanently at the site location. The Soviets would deploy the S-200 system in static batteries that typically comprised 6 single-rail launchers, supported by a long-range surveillance radar like the 5N62 Square Pair, a target search and acquisition radar like the P-14 Tall King, a missile guidance radar, and multiple other support elements. However, in video footage released by Ukrainian intelligence in May 2025, only the missiles and their launchers were visible. So it's not clear whether these systems are being used from their original sites, which have been reactivated, or have been installed at new sites, or have been modified into a mobile version. That kind of upgrade is just speculation at this point. However, one element of the original system that definitely does seem to have received a substantial upgrade is the guidance system. In its original form, the 5V28 series missiles use an inertial guidance system with updates provided by radio link before switching to semi-active radar homing for the terminal phase. For precise targeting of ground targets, the missile would have to be modified to hit within a certain circular error probability or use GPS. That would make it vulnerable to Russia's increasingly sophisticated GPS jamming and other electronic warfare systems. Nevertheless, according to an unmanned Ukrainian defense official who spoke to the Warzone, Ukraine received help from partners to produce an updated guidance system for the S-200. The missile itself has a good maneuvering system, so if provided with proper guidance, it's quite a modern weapon, the official added. That gives a clue as to how improved target acquisition and missile guidance are being achieved, and how it can bring down a target at such great range. As Western sensors or effectors become more prevalent in Ukraine, the S-200 may receive even more advanced sensors for targeting in the future. Another theory as to how the Ukrainians are coaxing 21st century performance from a 1970s machine comes from Trent Telenko, a former quality editor with the US Defense Contract Management Agency. Telenko, who is highly familiar with the S-200, its 5V28 missile and the SAM system's subsystems, suggests that Ukrainian technicians have replaced the 5V28's nose-mounted radar with a new seeker, perhaps the radar from the new Grom-2 surface-to-surface missile. The Grom-2 is a single-stage, solid-fueled rocket with a 310-mile range and a scene-matching millimeter-wave radar that would allow the rocket to precisely alter its flight path as it streaks towards its target. The 5V28 certainly has space for the Grom-2's compact radar. Telenko says that it's large enough to add a millimeter-wave radar and still pack in hundreds of pounds of explosives. But whichever the case may be, successful Ukrainian S-200 hits are racking up, both in terms of the ground strikes for which it's been adapted and its original use case as surface-to-air missiles. The first reports of its use actually came from Russia in the summer of 2023. The Russians claimed that S-200 missiles were being deployed in a surface-to-surface role to attack land targets in Russian rear areas, both within Ukraine and within Russia itself. One video from this period appears to show a missile that looks very similar to a 5V28 diving almost vertically onto a target in the Bryansk region of western Russia, which borders Ukraine. Another video from the same period shows what looks to be a 5V28 diving vertically onto a target, reportedly a sawmill, in the settlement of Bitosh, also in the Bryansk region. There were also Russian reports in 2023 of the Ukrainians using the S-200 to attack Morozovsk Air Base in the Rostov region and the Kerch Bridge that connects Russia to the Crimean Peninsula. Ukrainian media also reported an attempted strike on the bridge using the system. Russian sources claim that their air defenses shot down at least one missile just north of the Taman Peninsula, which borders the Azov Sea to the north, the Kerch Strait to the west, and the Black Sea to the south. Wreckage of the intercepted missile is said to have come down in the Azov Sea. Regardless of whether the bridge was actually hit or not, the incident reportedly led to the temporary closure of the Kerch Bridge, and the fact that the S-200 was used for such a pinpoint precision strike suggests that its guidance system is anything but old and decrepit, and probably makes use of GPS. Another confirmed strike, 17 days after the sawmill attack, ended with a 5V28 plunging into Taganrog, a Russian city 20 miles from the border with Ukraine and 100 miles from the front line. There was nothing of obvious military value on the block it hit, but it was obviously aiming for Taganrog Air Base, which lies just northwest of the city. At the time, the Russian Air Force operated drones, cargo planes, and Tupolev Tu-95 bombers from the sprawling base. Today, as a result of this and many other Ukrainian attacks within a similar radius from the front lines, Russia tends to launch its military aircraft from significantly deeper inside the vast country. And even then, they're far from safe, especially when the S-200 is at play. On January 14, 2024, an S-200 battery, perhaps the old Soviet battery in Dnipro, shot down a Russian Air Force Beriev A-50 early warning radar plane over the Azov Sea, around 100 miles from the front line. In the same operation, an Il-22 airborne command post was reportedly damaged beyond repair, but managed to land at a nearby airfield. Then, in its most noteworthy strike to date, the S-200 took down a Russian Tu-22M3 strategic bomber in mid-air over Stavropol Krai while it was flying over Russia on a combat mission. Russia only had 60 of these in 2018, and their subsequent focus with regards to bomber production seems to have largely been on the newer, more advanced Tu-95. Russia's defense ministry claimed that the Tu-22M crashed due to a technical malfunction while returning from a combat mission. One crew member was confirmed dead, another was reported missing, and a second bomber accompanying the flight reportedly turned back after the incident. Either way, this marked the first time one of these backfire bombers had been reported lost in the air since the war began. In the hours before it went down, various Ukrainian airspace monitoring channels reported that 3 Tu-22s launched missiles from the Black Sea west of Sevastopol, targeting the area of Zatoka town in Odessa Oblast. Ukrainian Air Force spokesperson Ilya Yevlash told AFP that the downed bomber had also been used in missile strikes on Dnipro and Kryvyi Rih, which killed at least 7 people, including 2 children, and injured 35. "This was the plane that bombed Dnipro and Kryvyi Rih. We took our revenge for our cities and citizens," she said. Kyrylo Budanov, the chief of Ukraine's main intelligence directorate, or HUR, told BBC Ukraine that the operation involved a week-long ambush, where Ukrainian forces waited for the Russian bomber to reach the desired range. He also revealed that the strategic bomber was hit from a distance of over 191 miles, using the same tactics and means employed in the previous downing of the A-50. There haven't been any further reports of the S-200 being used to either take down Russian planes or ground targets deep inside Russia since. Ukraine seems to have instead been leaning on its Western air defense systems to take down drones and planes, and making use of long-range drones, HIMARS, and Storm Shadows to strike inside Russia. So who knows what the next successful target will be? Perhaps it'll be a Tu-95 or something even juicier. One thing's for sure though, until Ukraine has a sufficient stockpile of new ballistic missiles, this revamped old beast is a valuable arrow in its quiver. But what do you think? Should Ukraine continue relying on the West to supply it with the weapons it needs to defend itself? Or should it focus more on its own defense industry, including putting modern twists on outdated weapons like the S-200? Or both? Let us know what you think in the comments, and thank you, as always, for watching.